The transport ship Galactic Unity hummed through the void between stars, carrying representatives from 12 different species to the neutral station orbiting Kepler 442b. Captain Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire adjusted his ceremonial scales as he reviewed the passenger manifest on his crystalline tablet. Among the names of distinguished beings from across the galaxy was one that made him pause. Human, Terra, Marcus Chen. Humans were a recent addition to the Galactic Council, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 standard years ago. Most species considered them primitive upstarts who had somehow stumbled into space technology before properly developing their civilization. The fact that one had been selected for the survival challenge was either a cosmic joke or a serious diplomatic error. Marcus Chen sat in the cramped passenger compartment, surrounded by beings that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest science fiction dreams. To his left, a crystalline entity named Quill hummed with internal light as it communicated through electromagnetic pulses. Across from him, Ambassador Throg of the Bruthan Confederation flexed muscles that could crush steel while discussing philosophy in perfect galactic standard. The survival challenge had been a tradition for over 3,000 years, designed to settle disputes between species through a test of pure survival skills rather than military might. When the trade disagreement between Earth and the Vorthan Empire had escalated to the point where war seemed inevitable, the Galactic Council had mandated that both sides participate in the challenge. The losing species would accept unfavorable trade terms for the next century. "Attention, passengers!" Captain Zethkar's voice echoed through the ship's translation system. "We are approaching Designation Survival World 847C. All challenge participants will be transported to the surface in 30 minutes. Remember, the rules are absolute. No technology beyond what your species naturally possessed before achieving spaceflight may be used. Violation results in immediate disqualification and severe penalties for your civilization." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had been a wilderness survival instructor and former military special forces operator before being recruited for this mission. Earth's government had chosen him specifically because of his expertise in primitive survival techniques. Still, he would be competing against species that had evolved on harsh worlds, possessed natural advantages like armored skin or enhanced senses, and had thousands of years more experience with organized survival challenges. The viewing port revealed their destination, a world of vast forests, towering mountains, and endless plains dotted with lakes and rivers. It looked almost like Earth, which Marcus found both comforting and suspicious. The Galactic Council had assured all participants that the world was neutral territory, uninhabited and natural. What they hadn't mentioned was how perfectly it seemed suited for testing every possible survival skill. As the transport entered the atmosphere, Marcus reviewed what he knew about his competition. The Vorthons were reptilian beings with natural armor and the ability to sense heat signatures. The krill possessed 4 arms and could digest almost any organic matter. The Zilnathi could survive in near-freezing temperatures and had natural camouflage abilities. Each species brought evolutionary advantages that had helped them survive on their homeworlds for millions of years. What did humans bring? Marcus touched the small pouch at his belt that contained his permitted items: a steel knife, flint and steel, 50 feet of paracord, a small metal pot, and basic medical supplies. According to the challenge rules, these items fell within the technological limitations because humans had possessed metallurgy, fire-making, and basic tools before achieving spaceflight. The irony wasn't lost on him. While other species had evolved natural advantages, humans had become the most adaptable survivors in the galaxy precisely because they lacked such advantages. They had been forced to innovate, to use tools, to harness fire, and to develop complex strategies just to survive on their own world. What the galaxy saw as primitive, Marcus understood as refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The landing pod separated from the transport ship, each carrying a single participant to a different starting location on the planet's surface. Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as his pod descended through the clouds. Through the small window, he could see dense forest rushing up to meet him. The pod's automated systems guided it to a clearing where it settled with a soft thud. The hatch hissed open, and Marcus stepped onto alien soil. The air was breathable but thin, suggesting higher altitude. The forest around him consisted of trees that looked similar to earth pines, but with bark that shimmered with an iridescent quality. Strange bird-like creatures called from the canopy above, their songs unlike anything from his homeworld. Marcus took a deep breath and began his assessment. First priority was shelter, then water, then food. He had landed near midday, judging by the position of the planet's orange-tinted sun, which gave him several hours to establish a basic camp before nightfall. The temperature was comfortable now, but he had no idea how cold it might get after dark. He began walking through the forest, noting the terrain and available resources. The trees were tall and straight, perfect for construction. Fallen logs provided abundant deadwood for fire. A stream babbled somewhere nearby, which solved his water concerns. Most importantly, he found signs of animal life, tracks in the soft earth, scat near the water source, and scratch marks on tree bark. While other participants might rely on their natural abilities to survive, Marcus began doing what humans did best. He started building tools. Using his knife, he cut a straight branch and began fashioning a spear, not because he expected to hunt large game immediately, but because having a weapon extended his reach and provided psychological comfort. The Galactic Council observers watched from their orbiting station, monitoring each participant through quantum scanners that could track life signs without interfering with the challenge. Most participants had found shelter and were settling in for their first night. The Vorthon representative had built a simple lean-to and was using his natural heat vision to hunt small prey. The Krill had found a cave and was foraging for plant matter with remarkable efficiency. But the human was doing something none of them had expected. Instead of simply surviving, he was systematically transforming his environment. Within hours of landing, Marcus had built not just a shelter, but a complex camp. He had constructed a lean-to with a reflective back wall to maximize heat from his fire. He had diverted a small stream to create a clean water collection pool. He had built fish traps from woven branches and set snares along animal trails. Most surprising to the observers was his use of fire. While other species could create fire through various means, none used it as extensively as the human. Marcus had built multiple fires, one for warmth, one for cooking, one for signaling, and even one set up to produce charcoal for future tool-making. He understood fire not just as a source of heat and light, but as a transformative force that could change his environment to suit his needs. As night fell on the first day, the observers noted that while other participants were conserving energy and staying alert for predators, the human was actively working. By the light of his fires, he was crafting additional tools, a bow and arrows, fishing hooks carved from bone, containers woven from plant fibers. He wasn't just surviving, he was establishing the foundation for thriving. The planet's nocturnal predators began to emerge as darkness settled over the forest. Most participants took defensive positions, relying on their natural senses and abilities to avoid danger. The Vorthon used his heat vision to track approaching threats. The Zilnathi's camouflage made her nearly invisible among the rocks where she had taken shelter. Marcus took a different approach. His fires created a perimeter of light that most predators instinctively avoided. He had positioned his camp on elevated ground, with good visibility in all directions. His spear was within easy reach, and he had prepared torches that could be quickly lit to extend his defensive perimeter if needed. When a pack of wolf-like creatures approached his camp, attracted by the scent of the fish he had caught and cooked, Marcus didn't retreat. Instead, he used his most powerful survival tool, his intelligence. He threw burning brands from his fire to create a barrier between himself and the predators. The creatures, confused and intimidated by the unusual display of controlled fire, retreated into the darkness. By morning of the second day, Marcus had accomplished more than most participants achieved in a week. He had a secure campsite, a reliable food source, clean water, and defensive capabilities. But more than that, he had begun to understand the ecosystem around him. He knew where different animals traveled, what plants were safe to eat, and how the weather patterns shifted throughout the day. The Galactic Council observers were beginning to take notice. What they had initially dismissed as the desperate flailing of a primitive species was revealing itself to be something far more sophisticated. The human wasn't just using tools, he was creating technology. His fish traps were more efficient than anything they had seen. His food preservation techniques using smoke and salt allowed him to build surplus supplies. His systematic approach to improving his situation was unlike anything in their records of previous challenges. As Marcus worked on expanding his shelter and improving his tools, he remained unaware that his performance was causing heated debates in the observation station. Some council members argued that his techniques violated the spirit of the challenge, even if they didn't technically break the rules. Others pointed out that everything he was doing fell clearly within the parameters of pre-spaceflight technology. What none of them fully understood was that they were witnessing the fundamental difference between humans and most other intelligent species. While other beings had evolved specific adaptations to survive in their environments, humans had evolved the ability to adapt their environment to suit their needs. Fire, tools, and weapons weren't just objects to humans. They were extensions of their consciousness, ways of imposing their will on the physical world around them. The first real test of Marcus's approach came on the third day when a massive storm system moved across the continent. The other participants took shelter and waited for it to pass, accepting that they would lose precious time and resources. Marcus had been monitoring the weather patterns and had prepared accordingly. His shelter was reinforced against wind and rain. His fires were protected by stone windscreens. He had even constructed gutters to collect rainwater for later use. While the storm raged, Marcus continued working inside his shelter, crafting arrows and improving his equipment. By the time the weather cleared, he had not only survived the storm without losing progress, but had actually advanced his position while his competitors were recovering from setbacks. The observers noted that several other participants were beginning to show signs of stress and resource depletion. The krill was struggling to find adequate nutrition from the local plant life. The Vorthon's natural armor provided protection but also required significant energy to maintain. The Xilnothi's camouflage abilities were less useful in an environment where she needed to actively forage and hunt. Marcus, meanwhile, was thriving. His systematic approach to survival had created a positive feedback loop where each improvement made the next one easier to achieve. His fish, the discovery of the beacon, changed everything. Marcus studied the holographic map, noting the locations of the other two markers. One was clearly positioned high in the mountain range visible to the north, probably requiring technical climbing skills. The other appeared to be underwater in the large lake system to the east. Both would test different aspects of survival expertise. More importantly, the beacon revealed that other participants were also finding and activating markers. Small indicators showed that 3 other beacons had already been activated across the planet. The challenge wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was a race to prove superior adaptation skills across multiple environments. Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing for extended travel. Using techniques his grandfather had taught him during childhood camping trips, he created a portable survival kit. He crafted a lightweight pack from animal hide and plant fibers, waterproofed with tree sap. His essential tools were arranged for quick access: fire-starting materials wrapped in waterproof bark, fishing line and hooks, his knife, and a compact bow with a quiver of arrows. The decision of which beacon to pursue first required careful strategy. The mountain peak would be the most physically demanding but probably offered the clearest route. The underwater beacon would require advanced diving techniques and pose the greatest risk of drowning. Marcus chose to head for the mountain first, reasoning that the physical challenges played to his military training. Meanwhile, in the observation station, the Galactic Council members were discovering disturbing trends in their data. The human participant was outperforming expectations by margins that challenged their understanding of survival dynamics. Counselor Vexhai of the Scientific Consortium pulled up comparative statistics on his quantum display. The human has achieved caloric surplus while other participants are operating at deficits, he reported to the emergency session. His tool creation rate exceeds anything in our historical records. Most concerning, his environmental modification activities are transforming the local ecosystem in ways that benefit his survival. Ambassador Throg shifted his massive frame, careful not to crush the delicate observation equipment. You speak as if this is problematic. The rules were clearly established. No technology beyond pre-spaceflight capabilities. The human has violated nothing. The concern, interrupted Director Xyloth of the Vorthan Empire, is whether we properly understood what pre-spaceflight technology meant for humans. Other species developed natural advantages through evolution. Humans appear to have developed technological advantages instead. The debate was interrupted by urgent alerts from the surface monitoring systems. Participant Krill 7845 was showing signs of severe nutritional distress. The plant life on the designated world, while technically edible to krill physiology, lacked essential nutrients their species required. Without intervention, Krill 7845 would face organ failure within days. Similar problems were emerging with other participants. The Xilnathi representative was struggling with the planet's day-night temperature variations, which exceeded her species' natural adaptation range. Even the Vorthan, despite his apparent early success, was beginning to show energy depletion from maintaining his heat vision in an environment with abundant thermal noise. The human, by contrast, was not only thriving but actively improving his situation. Drone surveillance showed him breaking camp and beginning a systematic trek toward the mountain beacon. His movement pattern indicated advanced navigation skills, following ridgelines and natural corridors that minimized energy expenditure while maximizing travel speed. Marcus reached the foothills of the mountain range by late afternoon of his fourth day. The terrain changed dramatically from the lowland forests to rocky slopes covered with hardy shrubs and sparse trees. The air grew thinner and colder as he gained elevation, but his preparation served him well. He had brought materials to construct shelter and had studied the mountain's profile to plan his ascent route. That evening, he established a base camp in a natural wind shelter among the rocks. Using techniques learned from mountaineering expeditions on Earth, he built a fire with reflector stones to maximize heat efficiency in the thin air. His dinner consisted of preserved fish from his lowland camp, supplemented by edible plants he had identified during his ascent. The real climbing would begin tomorrow, but Marcus used the evening to craft specialized equipment. He carved pitons from hard wood and fashioned climbing aids from his paracord. While other species might attempt the ascent using their natural abilities alone, Marcus approached it as an engineering problem to be solved with tools and planning. The Galactic Council observers watched with growing amazement as the human systematically addressed each challenge. Unlike other participants who relied on evolved traits, the human seemed to analyze each situation and develop specific solutions. His approach was methodical, innovative, and devastatingly effective. "He is not surviving," observed Counselor Vexhai during the evening briefing. "He is conquering. There is a fundamental difference in approach that we failed to anticipate." The climbing began at dawn. Marcus had studied the mountain face and identified a route that balanced safety with efficiency. He moved carefully but steadily, using his improvised climbing gear to secure progress up difficult sections. His military training in mountain warfare proved invaluable as he navigated vertical rock faces and unstable scree fields. Halfway up the mountain, he encountered his first real competition. Participant Vorth Prime had reached the same general area using his species' natural climbing claws and heat-sensing abilities. The Vorthon was making good progress up a parallel route, his reptilian physiology well suited to the rocky terrain. Marcus observed his competitor without making contact. The Vorthon was climbing efficiently, but had brought no equipment for the descent. More concerning, Vorth Prime showed no signs of having prepared for the mountain's notorious weather changes. Dark clouds were building on the horizon, and Marcus recognized the signs of an approaching storm system. Rather than racing to reach the beacon first, Marcus focused on sustainable climbing. He established intermediate camps with secure anchor points and emergency supplies. When the storm hit in mid-afternoon, he was prepared with shelter and equipment, while Vorth Prime was caught exposed on the mountainside. The Vorthon's natural armor provided some protection from the driving rain and hail, but his heat vision became useless in the storm's thermal chaos. Without proper equipment or preparation, he was forced to seek shelter in a shallow cave and wait for conditions to improve, losing precious time and body heat. Marcus, protected by his improvised shelter and equipped with fire-starting materials that worked even in wet conditions, continued climbing during breaks in the storm. His systematic preparation allowed him to make progress, while his competitor was pinned down by the weather. By late afternoon, Marcus reached the beacon's location near the mountain's summit. The device was hidden among wind-sculpted rocks in a position that required both climbing skill and puzzle-solving ability to access. As he activated the second beacon, the holographic display updated to show that he was now tied for the lead with one other participant who had successfully retrieved an underwater beacon. The descent proved almost as challenging as the ascent. Marcus used controlled rappelling techniques with his paracord, carefully managing the rope to avoid getting stranded on the mountain face. His systematic approach to the climb had included planning for the return journey, unlike some participants who seemed to focus only on reaching objectives without considering extraction. That evening, back at his base camp, Marcus reviewed his situation. 2 beacons activated, 1 remaining. The underwater beacon in the lake system would require different skills entirely: breath holding, underwater navigation, and dealing with aquatic predators. But first, he needed to cross significant territory to reach the lake region. The journey to the lake took 2 days of steady travel across varied terrain. Marcus moved efficiently, following game trails and natural corridors while maintaining his survival routines. He hunted small game with his bow, foraged for edible plants, and established overnight camps with fires and basic shelters. During this cross-country travel, Marcus encountered evidence of other participants' movements. Abandoned camps, disturbed vegetation, and tracks in soft ground told stories of struggles and setbacks. One site showed signs of a fierce battle between a participant and local predators, with bloodstains and scattered equipment suggesting a narrow escape or worse. The lake region presented entirely new challenges. The water was crystal clear but deceptively deep, with underwater rock formations and strong currents. Local wildlife included fish species that seemed harmless but might be territorial, and Marcus spotted what appeared to be amphibious predators basking on the shores. Marcus spent his first day at the lake, gathering intelligence. He studied the water patterns, observed wildlife behavior, and located the approximate position of the underwater beacon based on the holographic map. The device appeared to be about 30 feet down in a rocky area near the center of the lake. That evening, he began preparing for the underwater challenge. Using techniques learned from military diving operations, he practiced breath-holding exercises and planned his dive strategy. He crafted simple diving weights from rocks wrapped in hide to help him descend quickly and conserve oxygen. The dive itself required every bit of his underwater training. Marcus hyperventilated to load his blood with oxygen, then took a final deep breath and descended. The water was shockingly cold, but his body adapted quickly to the temperature change. He navigated by sight and touch, using the rock formations as landmarks. The beacon was hidden in an underwater cave that required swimming through a narrow opening. Marcus's heart rate spiked as he realized the challenge was more complex than a simple depth dive. He needed to navigate confined spaces while managing his oxygen supply and avoiding potential cave-in hazards. Fighting against the urge to panic, Marcus squeezed through the opening and found the beacon mounted on the cave wall. The activation sequence required manipulating several controls while maintaining position in the water current. His oxygen supply was running dangerously low when the device finally acknowledged his success. The return to the surface felt endless. Marcus's lungs burned with the need to breathe, but he maintained discipline and ascended at a controlled rate to avoid decompression issues. When he finally broke the surface and gulped air, he was already planning his exit strategy from the water where potential predators might be attracted by his activity. As he reached shore, the holographic display confirmed his success. 3 beacons activated. Marcus was now tied for first place with participant Zil-Nathi 7, who had also managed to activate all 3 beacons. But the challenge wasn't over. The final phase was just beginning. The display revealed a new objective. All participants who had activated beacons were now required to converge on a central location where the final test would determine the challenge winner. The location appeared to be in the Plains region, equidistant from all the beacon sites. Marcus studied the terrain between his position and the convergence point. Rolling grasslands with scattered forests, several river crossings, and what appeared to be ruins of some ancient structure at the destination. The journey would take at least 2 days of hard travel, and he would likely encounter other participants along the way. More concerning was the tactical situation. Up to this point, the challenge had been individual survival against the environment. Now it was becoming a direct competition. The journey to the convergence point took Marcus through terrain that seemed deliberately chosen to test every survival skill he had developed. Rolling plains gave way to dense forest, which opened onto rocky badlands before returning to grasslands. Each transition required adapting his movement techniques and resource management strategies. On the morning of his second travel day, Marcus encountered his first competitor since the mountain climb. Zil-Nathi 7, the Zil-Nathi participant who had also activated all 3 beacons, emerged from camouflaged concealment near a river crossing. Her species' natural ability to blend with surroundings had made her nearly invisible among the reeds and mud banks. The 2 survivors studied each other across 20 meters of shallow water. Zil-Nathi 7 was roughly humanoid, but with mottled skin that shifted colors to match her environment. Her 4-fingered hands ended in sharp claws, and her large eyes suggested excellent night vision. She carried no visible tools or weapons, relying entirely on her evolved advantages. Marcus raised one hand in a universal peaceful gesture while keeping his other hand near his knife. The Zil-Nathi responded with a complex gesture that he interpreted as acknowledgement without hostility. Both participants seemed to understand that premature conflict would only weaken them for whatever final test awaited. They crossed the river separately, maintaining distance but not actively avoiding each other. Marcus noted that Zil-Nathi 7 moved with remarkable efficiency, her camouflage abilities allowing her to blend with each new environment as she traveled. Her species had clearly evolved on a world where stealth and adaptation were essential for survival. The ancient ruins became visible late in the afternoon, massive stone structures that rose from the plains like artificial mountains. The architecture was unlike anything in Marcus's experience, with curved walls and spiral towers that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. As they approached, both participants could see that other survivors had already arrived. 3 other figures moved among the ruins. Marcus recognized the massive form of participant Throg 9, a Bruthan whose species possessed incredible physical strength and endurance. Near him stood what appeared to be Vorth Prime, the Vorthan climber who had somehow survived the mountain storm and completed his own beacon collection. The third figure was harder to identify from a distance, but moved with the characteristic flowing motion of an aquatic species. The convergence point was a circular amphitheater carved into the largest structure. Ancient stone seats surrounded a central platform where a new type of beacon waited. Unlike the simple activation devices they had found at other locations, this beacon was complex and multifaceted, with different colored sections that pulsed with internal light. As the 5 survivors gathered in the amphitheater, holographic displays activated around the perimeter. The familiar voice of the Galactic Council's challenge administrator echoed from hidden speakers. Congratulations to the 5 participants who have successfully demonstrated mastery of individual survival skills, the voice announced. You have proven your ability to adapt to different environments and overcome physical challenges. The final test will determine which among you possesses the ultimate survival trait, the ability to thrive through cooperation and conflict. The central beacon split into 5 separate components, each glowing with a different color. The holographic displays showed a new map of the surrounding region with marked locations for each component. Each participant must retrieve 1 beacon component from its designated location and return it to the central platform, the administrator continued. However, the final beacon will only activate when all 5 components are present simultaneously. You must choose whether to compete for individual dominance or cooperate for collective success. Marcus studied the map and felt his stomach sink. The component locations were spread across hostile terrain that would require significant time and effort to reach. More critically, the components appeared to be guarded by the planet's most dangerous predators. The challenge designers had created a scenario where individual success was nearly impossible, but cooperation risked betrayal. The other participants were reaching similar conclusions. Throg 9 flexed his massive muscles and growled something in his native language that the translators rendered as, "Bruthan warriors do not rely on the weak." Vorth Prime's heat-sensing organs focused on each competitor in turn, clearly analyzing them for tactical advantages. Zil Nathi 7 had already begun shifting her camouflage to match the ancient stones, preparing to disappear into the ruins. The aquatic participant, who Marcus now identified as Glub 7 from the Oceanic Hydrian Collective, spoke in the bubbling tones of his species. Cooperation benefits all. Individual pride serves none when death stalks the proud. Marcus found himself in the unexpected position of mediator. His military training had included lessons on coalition building and multi-species cooperation, knowledge that was proving unexpectedly relevant. We need to assess the individual challenges before making decisions, Marcus said, addressing the group in Galactic Standard. Each location appears designed to counter specific advantages. Working separately, most of us will fail. Working together, we all succeed. Throg 9 snorted dismissively. Humans speak of cooperation because they lack the strength to succeed alone. Bruthan strength requires no assistance from lesser beings. Your strength is impressive, Marcus acknowledged, but look at your assigned location. He pointed to the holographic map. Your component is guarded by a colony of tunnel-boring creatures that attack anything that enters their territory. Strength alone won't help if you're swarmed by hundreds of opponents in confined spaces. The Bruthan studied the map more carefully, his expression shifting as he processed the tactical situation. Marcus pressed his advantage. Each location is designed to neutralize our primary advantages. Zil Nathi 7's camouflage won't help against creatures that hunt by scent and vibration. Vorth Prime's heat vision will be useless in a location with high ambient temperature. Glub 7's aquatic advantages mean nothing in a desert environment. Marcus moved to the central platform and activated a detailed view of each component location. But our weaknesses can become strengths if we work together. I can create tools and weapons for specific situations. Zil-Nathi 7 can scout and gather intelligence. Throg 9 can handle direct physical challenges. Vorth Prime can track and navigate. Glub 7 can manage aquatic obstacles. The silence stretched as each participant considered the proposal. Marcus understood that he was asking beings from militaristic and competitive species to trust their ancient rivals. The success of his argument would depend on their ability to see beyond instinctive hostility. Glub 7 was the first to respond. The human speaks wisdom. Hydrian philosophy teaches that flowing water overcomes the hardest stone through persistence and cooperation with gravity. We accept this alliance. Zil-Nathi 7's camouflage shifted to reveal her actual position closer to the group. Zil-Nathi survival doctrine recognizes strength in numbers. We will participate in this temporary cooperation. Vorth Prime's thermal sensors continued scanning the group, but his voice carried grudging respect. Vorthon's honor tactical intelligence. The human's analysis appears sound. We agree to coordinate efforts. All eyes turned to Throg 9. The massive Bruthan warrior stood silent for long moments, his proud species warrior culture warring with practical necessity. Finally he spoke. Bruthans do not fear any challenge, but neither do we choose death over victory because of pride. We will work with this group, but expect equal sharing of risks and rewards. Marcus felt relief wash over him. The coalition was fragile and temporary, but it gave them all a chance at success. Then let's plan our approach. We have several hours of daylight remaining and should use them for reconnaissance. The group spent the afternoon studying each component location in detail. Marcus's designated target was in a canyon system where crystalline formations created a maze of reflective surfaces and optical illusions. Zil-Nathi 7 needed to enter a swamp filled with venomous creatures that detected prey through multiple sensory methods. Throg 9's component waited in the tunnel complex guarded by swarm insects. Vorth Prime faced a volcanic region where extreme heat would overwhelm his thermal senses. Glub 7's challenge lay in a salt desert where dehydration posed a deadly threat to his aquatic physiology. Each location required specialized preparation and support from the others. Marcus began crafting additional tools and weapons using materials from the ruins and his remaining supplies. Zil-Nathi 7 used her scouting abilities to map approach routes to each location. Throg 9 prepared defensive strategies for group protection. Vorth Prime planned navigation routes that minimized travel time. Glub 7 identified water sources and calculated hydration requirements for the desert mission. That evening, as they prepared for the next day's challenges, Marcus realized that something unprecedented was happening. 5 species that had been bred by evolution and culture for competition and conflict were learning to work together. Their individual strengths, combined and coordinated, were creating capabilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. The Galactic Council observers were reaching similar conclusions. Emergency sessions were being held to discuss the implications of what they were witnessing. This was not the intended outcome, Director Xyloth stated grimly. The final test was designed to force participants to choose between individual glory and collective failure. It was meant to confirm the superiority of evolved survival traits over primitive tool use. Counselor Vexahai manipulated his data displays, showing performance analyses from the past week. The human participant has fundamentally altered the nature of the challenge. Instead of competing for dominance, the survivors are evolving into a cooperative unit that enhances each member's capabilities. More concerning, added Ambassador Throg's superior, Our own participant is demonstrating that Bruthan warrior culture can adapt to include cooperation when tactically advantageous. This could have significant implications for future diplomatic relations. The observers continued monitoring as the surface team prepared for the final day of challenges. What they were witnessing represented a shift in galactic understanding of survival, cooperation, and the true nature of intelligence. Dawn brought the beginning of the final phase. The coalition moved out together, planning to tackle each component location as a coordinated effort rather than splitting up. Marcus had convinced the others that their combined abilities would allow them to overcome each challenge more effectively than individual attempts. The first target was Glub 7's desert location, chosen because the early morning hours offered the best conditions for the aquatic being. The coalition had prepared by constructing water carriers and cooling systems that would allow Glub 7 to survive the arid environment long enough to retrieve his component. The component was located in an oasis guarded by large reptilian predators that were perfectly adapted to desert conditions. Traditional Hydrian approach would have involved avoiding the confrontation entirely, but with support from his allies, Glub 7 could attempt a direct approach. Marcus created specialized weapons for desert combat, spears with fire-hardened points, slings for ranged attacks, and torches that would intimidate the cold-blooded guardians. Throg 9 provided the muscle for direct confrontation. Zil-Nathi 7 used her camouflage to scout the oasis and identify the guardians' patrol patterns. Vorth Prime's heat vision, partially functional even in the desert heat, helped track the creature's movements. The assault on the oasis was swift and precise. The coalition used coordinated tactics that confused and overwhelmed the guardian creatures, allowing Glub 7 to reach the component and extract it safely. The first success boosted their confidence and confirmed that their cooperative approach was working. They proceeded through the other locations with similar success. At each site, the combination of Marcus's tool-making abilities, Zil-Nathi 7's stealth and scouting, Throg 9's physical power, Vorth Prime's enhanced senses, and Glub 7's tactical intelligence proved superior to any individual approach. By late afternoon, all 5 components had been recovered. The coalition returned to the ancient ruins as the sun began to set, carrying the pieces that would complete their collective victory. As they assembled the components on the central platform, the beacon began to pulse with increasing intensity. Light spread through the ancient structure, activating systems that had been dormant for thousands of years. The amphitheater filled with harmonic tones that seemed to celebrate their success. The holographic displays activated once more, but this time the voice that emerged was different, older, wiser, and tinged with what might have been approval. "You have completed the true test," the new voice announced. "Not the test designed by the current Galactic Council, but the test built into this world by its original creators. You have discovered that survival is not about individual dominance, but about the ability to adapt, cooperate, and transcend the limitations of evolution through intelligence and unity." The 5 participants looked at each other with new understanding. They had not merely survived a challenge, they had passed a test that predated their civilizations by millennia. "The survival challenge as practiced by the current Galactic Council will end," the voice continued. "In its place, a new tradition will begin. Cooperation challenges designed to build understanding between species rather than establish dominance. You 5 will serve as the first instructors in this new tradition." Marcus felt the weight of history settling around them. What had begun as a dispute over trade agreements had become something far more significant. Humanity's approach to survival, adaptability, tool use, and cooperation had not only won the immediate challenge, but had fundamentally changed how the galaxy viewed the relationship between species. As the ancient systems powered down and the immediate crisis ended, Marcus realized that the real victory was not his individual success, but what they had all learned together. The galaxy was about to discover what humans had known all along, that the greatest strength was not in individual superiority, but in the ability to bring different strengths together in common cause. The transport ship that arrived to collect them carried representatives from every major galactic government. The 5 survivors had become more than challenge winners. They were now ambassadors for a new era of interspecies cooperation. Marcus looked out at the stars as they departed the planet that had tested and changed them all. Humanity had earned its place in the galactic community, not through superior evolution or advanced technology, but through the simple recognition that survival was better achieved together than alone. It was, he thought, the most human victory possible, between survivors who had already proven their capabilities. Marcus didn't know what the final test would involve, but his military experience suggested it might require combat skills, or at least direct confrontation. He spent the evening preparing for the journey and potential conflict. His toolkit was optimized for survival and hunting, but could be adapted for defense if necessary. His bow was accurate and powerful enough to be effective against most opponents. His knife was well balanced for both utility and combat use. Most importantly, Marcus began thinking strategically about his approach to the final phase. While other participants had relied on their natural advantages to reach this point, he had succeeded through adaptability, preparation, and systematic problem-solving. Those same qualities would need to serve him in whatever test awaited at the convergence point. The Galactic Council observers were preparing for what promised to be a dramatic conclusion to the most unusual survival challenge in their records. The human participant had not only survived but dominated the individual phases through techniques that pushed the boundaries of what they considered primitive technology. But the final test would determine whether human adaptability could triumph over millions of years of evolution's finest survival advantages. Wraps provided protein that gave him energy to hunt larger game. His bow and arrows allowed him to take down prey that provided materials for better tools. His food surplus gave him time to explore and map the surrounding territory, but the real test was yet to come. Unknown to the participants, the survival challenge included more than just staying alive. Hidden throughout the planet were marker beacons that participants needed to find and activate to prove their mastery of the environment. The locations were chosen to test different survival skills. One was on a mountain peak requiring climbing expertise, another was underwater in a deep lake, a third was hidden in a swamp filled with dangerous predators. As Marcus explored his territory, he discovered the first beacon purely by accident while tracking a herd of deer-like creatures. The device was camouflaged among rocks near a waterfall, and it activated when he approached. The holographic display showed a map of the planet with 3 points highlighted, confirming what he had suspected. This was more than just a basic survival test.